So we're going to first talk a little bit about what Twin Oaks is, and Stephan's going to run our slideshow here. So this is our pond where we live in our community. We're an intentional community in rural central Virginia. We're just about a 45-minute drive from here. We're made up of around 90 adult members and 15 children, and that can change depending on who's coming and going, but we are generally at around 90 and have been for some time. And our community began in 1967, so we celebrated our 50th anniversary recently. That's what we have. We have our 50th t-shirts on today from our anniversary. Since then, our way of life is reflective of our values, which our shared values mostly consist of cooperation and sharing, nonviolence, equality, and ecology. We don't have a group religion. We have all sorts of diverse beliefs within our community. We don't have a central leader. We govern ourselves according to responsibility shared out among managers and among planners and members and committees. Stephan will talk a little bit more about how our power share works in that way later on. We are economically self-supporting, and we're partly self-sufficient in terms of what we produce for ourselves. That mostly comes from our big garden, and we raise most of our own meat and animal products on the farm. We're income sharing, which means that the money that we earn through our businesses goes to the community as a whole, and we spend the money as a whole for the most part. We do get a small monthly stipend. I think it's around $100 for personal money, which doesn't sound like a whole lot, but when your clothes and healthcare and food and housing are all your basic needs are taken care of already, that money is for chocolate and coffee and a trip to visit your family and things like that. So that's kind of how we deal with our money. Each member works about 42 hours a week in the community's businesses and domestic areas, and we track our labor. We have a complicated and intricate labor system where we write down what we do. Our work is an hour for an hour, so no matter if we're doing the planner job, which is like the big coordinator for everything in the whole community, or if we're just schlepping rocks in a wheelbarrow, you count the hour the same. This is some people weaving hammocks. Hammocks is a nice job. You can do it indoors or outdoors. And we set up our hammock looms so that people can weave across from each other, which is really, as one of our members says, it makes it less efficient, but it makes it more pleasant to be working with someone in that way. And I feel like a lot of our work is like that. We often sacrifice the most efficient thing for human comfort and human interaction while these things go on. And the 42 hours include both business work and domestic areas. So, here's Ezra holding up a big thing of our tofu. If you ever see Twin Oaks tofu around, we're in a lot of grocery stores and restaurants, especially ones that serve vegan food, like to buy our tofu. He's very proud of this one. So our businesses comprise a big chunk of our labor, but also we put more than that even into our domestic areas. So things like washing the community's laundry and cooking dinner and cleaning the house in public spaces all count as part of those 42 hours. So it's not like you're coming home at the end of a 42-hour work week and having to do all your house chores. That's kind of rolled into your life, which affords us a little bit more flexibility with what we do in our non-income producing time. I already covered the housing. We all live together in group houses. It's a lot more efficient to live in a house with 11 people like Stephan and I do than in a single family home, which might have 2 people or 3 people. So that cuts down on a lot of our expenses and a lot of what we're using up in terms of resources when we share homes in that way. Our businesses include hammocks and tofu. We have a book indexing business collective, book indexing collective. Stephan and I are both newly trained book indexers, so we've been putting out the book indexes to our clients lately, which has been a lot of fun and a lot of intense learning on our parts. We have a seed growing business. We grow organic seed. We mostly focus on cucurbits right now, I think, and peppers and that sort of thing. And we also do seed wholesale for Southern Exposure Seed Exchange. And we have a couple of their catalogs so you can see what they're up to. This is our neighbor community, Acorn, who does this business. And we do part of their work for them, and we basically work as contractors or as laborers for this other community that's nearby. We share a lot. So that's most of what we do for income, and we have smaller business as well. A lot of passion projects. Someone really loves making chairs, and so we have homemade Windsor chairs that come out of our community. And someone really loves growing ornamental flowers. So at the Charlottesville Farmers Market, you'll see Tigger, who has flowers from Twin Oaks community. He usually brings some tofu there as well. So yeah, our domestic tasks as including the things you might think of in your day-to-day, like cooking, cleaning for your household. Also include caring for our animals. We have cows and chickens right now. We've had various animal programs, but right now our cows and chickens are doing great. We have a large garden, which does most of our vegetables. We have childcare. We both have a preschool type childcare in the morning for the little kids. We have tutoring. We have also primaries, which are like one-on-one childcare with a kid, and you get to, it's kind of like cross between a babysitter and a cool aunt or something, or uncle, or something like that. So you develop a relationship with the kids in the community. And the thing about our work system, one of the things is many people do lots of different stuff. There was Valerie on a tractor. We have our own forestry crew. We sustainably harvest wood from our land, and that is how we heat our homes. There's Valerie working on a solar panel up on the roof. We have a solar array that we sell back to the grid, so that's really nice to get a little bit of passive income that way to offset the energy costs of what we use. And our work, we don't do the same job. As you could hear in our intros, we do many, many, many different things. Nobody does just one job. And our shifts are short. It's easy to get bored if you're working 8 hours a day at the same job every day. I think 4 hours is a pretty long shift for a Twin Oaker. So you might do 3 different things in a day, or 4, and that's totally normal. Oh, these are some of our beautiful cattle, and some people are working in, I think that might be the orchard over there. We do have a apples and pears orchard. And apart from our lives on the farm and the work we do there, a lot of us choose to be politically active as well. And that's supported to some degree through the community. People work in issues of peace, ecology, anti-racism, and feminism. And here's our line. We're drying our clothes in the sun. We have a movement support budget, which is hours that count towards your labor quota for the week. But you can use those hours to go do outreach projects or protests or community service, whatever you're being called to do. So if you can run that by through the community, you can get some of your work covered through your activism, which is pretty sweet. And here is a group at Beltane. This is probably when we look the most like a hippie commune, because everybody gets together and puts on their flowers, and it's just a really sweet celebration. And we like to do big parties together a few times a year. We work really hard, but we also take time out to celebrate with each other and have a good time. So Stephan's going to talk a little bit about how our power systems work at Twin Oaks.
Yeah, so everybody comes from mainstream society and then moves to Twin Oaks generally. We don't have a whole lot of people who just totally grew up within Twin Oaks. So we're all coming in with our baggage from the outside world. And so we have a lot of systems in place to try to de-emphasize whatever power structures we learned from the outside and try to move us in a better direction. The main guiding documents for the community are the bylaws. And in the community bylaws, one of the very first things it says is, together, our aim is to perpetuate and expand a society based on cooperation, sharing, and equality, with no special privilege or benefit associated with positions of responsibility, and does not permit the power or influence necessitated by efficient government to differentially promote the welfare of a governing group or any other subgroup. So we have planners, and we have managers, and we have people just jumping on a shift, and none of those are valued differently in terms of our work structure. There's not a benefit to being a manager other than you really like doing it. You don't get paid more, you don't get perks, you just are like, oh, I have the capacity to offer more in this area, I'm gonna do it. And then we're like, yay, you did it, and we don't have to. So we have what's called the planner-manager system, which is pretty much the only thing left over from our beginnings as a behaviorist community. We were founded based on the book Walden 2 and B.F. Skinner stuff, but we pretty much moved away from all of that except for the planner-manager system. And so how that works is the planners are kind of the responsible for the widest amount of things. Like if anything doesn't necessarily fall within a particular small area, then it's the planners who might make that decision. So that would be things like buying more land. That's like a huge community thing to talk about. Or moving budget hours or money from one area to another. The planners would have authority over that. But the planners are a rotating group of about 3 people with only an 18-month term. So basically anyone at any point should and can be a planner. I did my first round of being a planner when I had only been there like 2 years. So it's not necessarily like a position that's held by longer-term members or is hard to get. There is like a vetting process in terms of like people will give input on whether you might be good or what might be challenges with you in that position, but ultimately like everybody gets a shot at it basically. It's sometimes a hard position to fill because it is a lot of responsibility, and so sometimes we have elections if there's no planners. We run elections and then try to like make a new plannership happen.
There's usually a lot of discussion within the community. Someone will see somebody they would love to be a planner and go to that person and say, hey, I think you would be great at this job. And usually it takes some convincing on the part of several people for someone to step up and take that.
Yeah, kind of a little bit of our relationship with power is that like if somebody's really eager to have some sort of responsible position, you're like, what are you up to? But if you're like, no, okay, fine, people keep asking me, I'll do it, then you feel a lot more confident in them. Because they're just doing what the community wants, not necessarily after their own purposes. So yeah, the planners make the big decisions. However, they're not like the ultimate decision maker. Things can be appealed. And if a planner decision gets appealed, then it's a vote of the entire membership. But we generally try to make decisions lower and more decentralized because we don't want it to necessarily be like this majority rules thing where we're just counting straight votes and it's a total numbers game. Like that's not super great. So we have a lot of different managers of different areas, and that's kind of the first level of decision making. So like we have one manager of garden, and that manager is responsible for all garden tasks. They might make the decision themselves or with the other garden folks to be like, let's cut back on potatoes this year, let's make a little bit more cucumbers, things like that. But if they were like, we're going to cut the garden in half, or we're just totally not going to do watermelons this year, that would be a decision that's a little bit bigger and would require them like posting a note to the community and getting more input before they actually made that decision, because any decision they make could be appealed to the council. We have so the garden and cows and orchard are all in the agriculture council. So yeah, a manager decision could be appealed to the council decision could be appealed to the planners, the planner decision could be appealed to the entire voting body. So yeah, you might think, oh, hippie commune, that sounds so cool. It's all do what you want, but we have a lot of rules at our particular one. There's definitely other communities that have more of a do what you want and we'll figure it out. Ours is very, very structured. Our policy binder is 2 binders that are probably like this thick. There's like a policy for every area. There's a policy on whether you can ride bikes on or off the farm and whose bikes are they if you're using it on the farm. And there's a policy for like where and when you can have certain levels of clothing on and it be appropriate. And there's policies for how loud you can be in the kitchen. There's policies for everything. So it's not always everyone's favorite if you're not into a lot of bureaucracy. But the benefit is that all of the stuff, all of the rules, all of the policies are things that we've all agreed upon and decided amongst ourselves. It's not some outside group that's far removed from us telling us what to do. When you like violate a policy, what it's saying is you're not abiding by our agreements with each other. So let's talk about that. So it's very different than some kind of arbitrary punishment based on something that you didn't have any say in.
Mm-hmm. And we can also change policies too. If there's something you see that has become obsolete or that you really don't like, there are processes that you can go through to change policy within the community. Just nice to have that kind of, everyone has that sort of power over what could happen.
Yeah, and we also have a large teaching culture. So the managers will, teach various things to other workers in the area. A lot of people, for instance, come to Twin Oaks not knowing a whole lot about mechanical things, for instance, but you're like, oh, cars are kind of interesting, and then you jump on a cars shift, and then a year or 2 later, you know all about cars, and you didn't have to pay to go to any sort of specialized classes or, get a degree in it or anything. I fix a lot of appliances and stuff, and part of that was just learning from the previous equipment maintenance manager and then looking at YouTube stuff and then realizing like, oh, I don't need official permission to fix this thing. I can just figure it out and take the time I need to figure it out, and then that makes me feel, oh, I can learn all sorts of things. Oh my gosh. And especially for like women or queer folks who don't necessarily have that kind of like, you can do whatever you want, you can have access, you can have technical knowledge. That's really empowering to be able to access that information and feel like you can do things if you want to. Let's see. Another way that we make decisions is a large written culture. We have what's called the O&I board. We don't actually know what it stands for at this point. It could be opinions and information or something like that.
Or oi.
Oi. But basically, if you have a proposal or you want to change a policy or you want people's opinion about something, you can just write it and stick it on the board with a bunch of blank sheets of paper behind it, and then people can write down what they think about your proposal. And we also have community meetings also, but we have a lot of written culture at Twin Oaks, so most of it happens on the O&I and then maybe a follow-up meeting. Our sibling community, Acorn, is like 30 people, so they have meetings every single week and don't have like a written board really. They just have 2-hour meetings and hash it all out, so there's definitely different ways to do that. Okay. So one of our taglines is, it's not utopia yet. So we definitely don't have everything perfect. The written versus face-to-face culture is definitely a debate that we often have. Like, is our heavy use of written culture accessible to everyone? Is it part of white mainstream privileged learned aspects of a certain class? Yes, so we're wrestling with that. We have new members and established members, and so new members coming in aren't going to necessarily come in with the knowledge of how the systems work, and so we have like new member liaisons that try to help guide them through that process, but we're like aware of the power dynamic difference that just knowledge provides. Even though we don't say, older members are valued more, there's definitely that difference of how long you've been around and what you've soaked up already. And then we also have members and visitors. We have 3-week visitor programs that basically happen every month. So people can come and learn more about Twin Oaks and possibly join. That's the first step in the official membership process, is to come visit for 3 weeks. And we say, members, don't get together and have relationships with the visitors. That will affect the power imbalance of their decision to join Twin Oaks or not. So we have all of these things that we're aware of and constantly trying to navigate as we look at power in the community. And there's probably more stuff, but we'll move on now to the nonviolence aspects.
So we definitely promote ourselves as a nonviolent community, and that's one of our biggest agreed upon values. But there are differences in what individuals think that nonviolence means to them. So our bylaws, that big document that's important to the basis of our community, says, together our aim is to perpetuate and expand a society based on cooperation, sharing, and equality, which strives to treat all people in a kind, gentle, honest, and fair manner without violence or competition. So some of the ways that this plays out within our community is we have a very firm weapons policy. We have no guns on our farm, except for the one we use for cow slaughter, which is kept under 2 different locks with 2 different people having the keys. We have limits on other weapons. We have limits on war toys. Some people on our farm are very upset by things like squirt guns. So there are policies and limits around having those in public space. We have a group of people there who know each other really well also and look out for each other. And it makes for a very safe feeling of a community. It's very safe there to walk around at night. Stephan and I can go out by ourselves in the middle of the night and just wander and not think anything of it except maybe tripping over a root and falling in a ditch, which is such a Twin Oaks thing to do. We don't usually remember a flashlight. Women and queer people don't feel that sort of internal anxiety. I didn't realize I was holding so much of that when I moved to community, that I can just walk around and expect to have people treat me well, no matter where I was in the area. We also generally feel very safe at our parties. I know that a lot of times they'll say things like, oh, you always have to hold your drink at a party, or watch who you're with at a party. And I feel like we don't have a whole lot of that in our community. I'm always setting my drink on top of the fridge or whatever and wandering around, and we don't really worry in that way. I feel it's pretty safe in general for women and LGBTQ folks on the farm, which is such a relief. We take physical violence very seriously. It's an expellable offense, and it's something that people definitely have been expelled for, even as a one-time thing. They hit their partner one time, or they shoved somebody one time, and then they've been expelled. And that's it's definitely been a source of debate about whether we should have done these things, but it is something that we take seriously within our community. We have a strong culture of explicit verbal consent with touching one another, which helps us avoid crossing boundaries into something that is violence to one person or another. I think even after 5 years living there are 3 people on the farm that I have the relationship with that I can touch without asking first. It's something we give workshops on when people are visitors. When they're a new member, we do another workshop on consent. And before large parties, we throw big parties a few times a year, and sometimes folks come in from off the farm who might not be familiar with our culture and our norms around consent. And we give workshops before those parties and strongly encourage anyone who's going to attend to come and attend that. And that's not only with, hey, may I touch you? It's also in terms of asking, hey, I would like to have a conversation about work with you. Are you ready for that right now? Or saying, hey, I have something emotional to talk about. Would you be up for processing that with me? So since we all live together and we don't have a lot of private space, setting these, allowing someone to set this boundary before they are jumping into this possibly stressful conversation really is important for us. We also try to be less violent towards our environment and towards the earth. And that comes really naturally when our environment is set up such that it's easy to do things that are ecologically friendly. Like the compost bin is right there. Of course we'll put our thing in the compost instead of the trash. And like we all live together in the large house, so of course we're going to use less resources without even thinking about it than somebody in a single family home. We have electric hybrid vehicles, and our fleet of vehicles that we share is
we have 17 vehicles for about 100 people, and so we just assign them out when we want.
Yeah. So we have about a fifth of the carbon footprint each of somebody living in like average mainstream America. And of course the violence issue is complicated, and we have lots of little nuances and debates about that. Part of what we debate about recently has been our media consumption, which has definitely shifted over the years. In Twin Oaks' early days, they didn't have the computer that you could take in your room and watch a video on. And so I feel like, from what I hear from longer term members, media consumption was more intentional. There was a group that was all going to watch this thing together, and they all agreed on this thing. And at the farm now, it's very possible to sit in your room watching very violent things on Netflix or whatever on your computer. So it's something that we talk about, and different people feel different levels of okay with viewing violence on screen. We have policies against mental abuse and abuse of words, and that becomes very complicated in terms of what that actually is. At what point is someone stating something strongly, and at what point is it abusive? At what point is raising your voice to someone okay, and at what point is that like a weird cultural quirk of certain white segments of America that it's not okay to raise your voice? And so we talk about that. We have people who do and don't see property damage as an aspect of violence. We definitely have an anarchist contingent that says property damage is nothing, like it doesn't count as violence. We have a lot of debates around our animals, both the ones that we have on the farm and our factory farm purchases. A lot of us don't want to eat factory farm meat because of the damage to the environment and the damage to the animals, but it's also more removed, so we're not seeing these processes happen with these animals. So we have our cows and our chickens, and there's big debates about how we treat them. We want to be as kind to them as possible, but still have them produce enough food and enough eggs for us. So there's debates at which time is it appropriate to kill the chickens, or do they need to live out a natural chicken life? And do we keep the mother cow and the baby cow together, or do they need to be separated in order for milk production to go on at the level that we would like to be consuming it? So these are things that we think about. And we also have some debate around how we deal with sexual assault on the farm, which is something that does come up periodically. I think Stephan could talk a little bit about that team, because I'm not super familiar with it.
Yeah, so we have a policy that's the sexual assault and harassment response policy, and it's very similar to how we deal with any other sort of process type thing. There's a team that like checks in with the focus people, and I think the difference between the way that we do it and the mainstream is that we do offer a lot more support and belief to the survivor who is telling us that something happened. We're like, yes, we don't need to know, like, prove whether it happened or get the facts right. Like, we believe what you're saying is true. So I think that's a little bit better than what happens in mainstream, but it's also still complicated because, as in many situations, it's usually somebody that you know who is the perpetrator. And so both the survivor and the perpetrator are in the community, have friendships with a lot of different people. So how do you deal with that? Do you kick someone out? Do you try to do some sort of restorative justice? How much responsibility do we have for teaching the perpetrator a different way? So it's definitely still an area that we haven't totally figured out yet. And I think we're kind of with the rest of mainstream and trying to figure out what is the appropriate way to deal with this type of extreme violation in this way. So not utopia yet. But we definitely try to offer a lot more support than is found in the outside world. And
I guess I could read this a little bit.
Sure, the equality.
So we're going to talk a little bit about how we aim for equality and equity with one another. Our bylaws say, together our aim is to perpetuate and expand a society based on cooperation, sharing, and equality, which in the behavior of individuals and of the community strives to eliminate the attitudes and results of sexism, racism, ageism, and competitiveness.
Yeah, so some ways that happens in our reality is income sharing is a huge one. So just by having the income sharing aspect, you are putting everyone on a more even playing field. Not everybody comes in with the same class background, so that's still a thing, but while you're on the farm, everyone's receiving the same healthcare, the same access to clothing, food, shelter. Everyone gets the same amount of disposable income. So that will lessen feelings of jealousy or scarcity or visible class difference, mostly. We also have a norm where you don't have cell phones and electronics out in public. So that's also part of that, taking away that class difference, jealousy feelings that someone has more and you don't. The income sharing aspect also helps eliminate the need for romantic relationship ties to also be financial ties. So couples are not given their income together. They don't necessarily live in the same room or the same building. Everyone has their own room. Everyone has their own finances. There's not really any need to merge finances or decide whether it's time to move in together or anything like that. You can decide to be with somebody because that's what you want to do, not for any sort of outside pressure or my lease is running out or, oh, we're ready to have a baby. The community is going to support you in those things. You don't need to necessarily be married or have a particular relationship style in order to do those things with your finances. So that's super great. And there's a lot of different relationship styles that are more prevalent at Twin Oaks because that's not necessarily a tie. So there's a little bit more polyamory or casual dating or party kind of situations, monogamish type stuff, which is more possible because the community supports you as an individual and you can make those choices for yourself.
Yeah, you can also choose to leave a relationship without having to move out of your house or be bankrupt if your partner was the provider or anything like that. So my hope is that our structure helps people leave relationships when they want to rather than sticking around for unhealthy reasons.
And it also just lets you try out different jobs and different ways of life without worrying about, oh, can I afford rent or something like that. You can be like, I don't really feel like doing seeds anymore, I want to do cars, and you can just do it. Or you're like, oh, I need to balance all my tofu work with something a little more intellectual, and you can just do that. Each living group, we have 7 different houses with 9 different small living groups because some of them have an upstairs and a downstairs. So each of those small living groups has about 10 people. And so each of those groups of 10 people have different cultures around how they decide to share space and what are the age demographics? Are children allowed in that building or not? And so you can be totally change different lifestyle aspects depending on where you want to live. And room openings happen really frequently. So you can change your building, or you can stay in the same. This was since I moved to Twin Oaks, I've stayed in the same building in the same room for now 5 years, and like previous to that, I had like moved apartments every year or so. So
same with me.
the longest I've been.
There are new members right now who've been there for 2 months, and they've tried out 5 different rooms. So it depends on how much you like to stay put.
If you want like the family one or the party one, or
Yeah, they all have their own little culture.
So you can do that.
So we are a feminist community, and by that we mean we believe in equality for all genders. And all genders are given chances to do all kinds of jobs. So as you've seen on the slideshow earlier, Valerie was on the tractor, and we have women and queer people doing maintenance and car stuff and all sorts of, like, any job can be for anybody. We have all jobs as the same labor credit, except for childcare is half creditable when it's one-on-one. So that's one area in which we're not entirely equal, and we haven't figured out how to do one-on-one childcare at full labor credit and still not have our quota be absurd. So it is something that chafes, especially since women and queer people wind up doing the brunt of childcare. In terms of who takes those one-on-one childcare jobs. There's a gender balance in community and on some teams. So a lot of our intentional communities have an issue where many men move there, and many more men are up for moving there than women or other people. And so a lot of the balance is just to keep that ratio in check. I'm not sure exactly what our percentage is right now, but at a certain point we'll cap a gender that's gotten too many in the community.
Right now, the policy is that if either men or women, binary genders, fall below 40%, there'll be a cap on the opposite. So if like the number of women in the community falls below 40%, there'll be a cap on the number of men joining until it's above 40%. Non-binary people at this point don't count in the ratio. If there's too many non-binary people, that is the community I want to live in, so I'm not too worried about that right now.
Yeah. And some of our teams have a gender balance too, and that's becoming more obsolete as more non-binary people move to our community, which is pretty swell. But we do still have, we just revised policy on our membership team to still try to keep a balance so that the team doesn't become all binary identified men or women, and so that, there's an equal opportunity for an assortment of people on our teams. We also have a gradual retirement system. We have everybody from our baby is Wilhelmina. She's 2 months old. She's very sweet. Rosie and Jen, our friends, had this baby. And our oldest person is in their 80s. So we really run the gamut in terms of age. And we have a gradual retirement system. So at age 50 right now, you start having to work one less hour per week every year. So it's like it tapers you off gradually. You gradually get more free time as you might have less energy for work. We're still tweaking that system because some people are very energetic 60-year-olds, and some people have a lot of health issues at 60 and need more in terms of a break from work and more care hours. We have generous family and pregnancy resources. I don't know how people have children in the mainstream after being at Twin Oaks, because we offer so much in terms of support and in terms of hours for caring for that child. You can hand that baby to anybody and go get something to eat. Like that, it's very communal in some ways, child raising there. We have a vibrant and growing LGBTQ population, which I'm super excited about. And yeah, it feels like we're at critical mass right now. It feels happy and good to be queer at Twin Oaks. Oh yeah, and we talked a little about movement support before and some of the things that they support. And Stephan was actually the movement support manager for a while, so maybe they could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so movement support is an area with a manager similar to how like garden or cows or what have you is, but it's money and hours for protests and other activist causes and stuff like that. So there's been like Black Friday Walmart protests. A lot of Twin Oakers did the I-64 blockade with Black Lives Matters. We're really adamant that since Twin Oaks is not a political organization as an entity, we have a very particular tax status as basically a monastery. The people going out to do the actions are not representing Twin Oaks, so it's not necessarily that Twin Oaks supports this or supports that, but we allow people the time to go do the things that they're passionate about, and I feel like that's definitely part of our mission to promote equality not only at Twin Oaks but also in the world at large. It's really easy to feel like at Twin Oaks you're in your little bubble and you don't really have to care about anything else because, oh, we're doing so good and we've got our shit together, but like the reality is that the whole earth is still warming and we're a part of it and all of this. So it's definitely good to keep touch with activists outside of Twin Oaks doing really awesome work. And because our labor system is so flexible, it's really easy for people to be like, oh my gosh, a protest is coming up. Who can work my tofu shift? I'm getting in the van. And we can like work that out, and people who can offer support can cover people's jobs who want to go out on the front lines.
We also have a little bit more arrestability in terms of protests than a lot of people, because we're not going to lose our job if we get arrested at a protest. We're not going, and having that on our record isn't going to affect our employment. And we do have that flexibility with our labor system that if something happens, someone can take over. Mm-hmm. But again, yeah, as individuals supported by a community, not as emissaries of the community, people do these things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and once again, we do have some debates. Everybody doesn't come in with the same class background, so that's the thing. If somebody comes in with all their gadgets and somebody who's been at Twin Oaks for 20 years is like, I want a laptop, but I can't afford one. How do you deal with that? We also have a lot of people of color at our community, but it's still very, very white. And communities in the movement in general, and the FEC and the FIC.
That's the Federation of Egalitarian Communities and the Federation of Intentional Communities, mm-hmm. which are two larger umbrella organizations.
Yeah, are still very primarily white organizations trying to figure out how to make things more diverse. So that's definitely a thing that we're working on. Even though we're also at like LGBTQ critical mass, like there's still a lot of people who don't necessarily understand pronouns and why they're important and things like that. So, but it's a bunch of people who care about you as a person. So they're like your well-meaning family members who are trying really hard and don't quite get it yet. So it's sometimes disheartening, but I care personally more about the income sharing awesomeness of what we're doing and am willing to put energy towards education in that area. But if you want like a totally rad, queer, POC-centric place, we're not that yet. So you have to figure out like which thing is more important and where you're willing to put your energy into changing whatever it is. Yeah.
So yeah, that's a little bit about what we're up to. If you want to learn more about us beyond the question and answers that we're about to do, you can go to our website, www.twinoaks.org, and that'll have, it's a pretty comprehensive website, and it'll tell you a lot more about what we're up to. We have Saturday tours available. Like we said earlier, it's just 45-minute drive, and then you can come out on a Saturday. Our tours are from 2 to 5. You have to call ahead and reserve a spot, but that's a really fun way to get to walk around and see the community and get someone who's lived there a long time to talk to you more about it. We also offer a 3-week structured visit, and that's designed to give visitors some general education and experience in living in Twin Oaks. That visitor period is a prerequisite to becoming a member right now. So some of the people in that visitor period are just coming to see what Twin Oaks is about and spend some time living and working in community with us. Some of the people are headed towards membership and are trying to see if it's a good fit for them and applying. We also have some really fun ways to come and see us, which are our conferences. Every summer we host a women's gathering. We host a queer gathering, which Stephan and I help put on. And we host a communities conference, and that welcomes both community experienced communitarians and also people who are just interested in community living to come and share and learn about different communities. There's a lot going on locally. There's a lot of local communities that you can learn about, and also to that conference, lots of other people throughout the states and even abroad come. So it's pretty cool. Our conferences are campouts for the most part. Some of them have indoor housing options, but it's really fun. We feed you good food. There's tents and bonfires and stuff. I brought a little bit of literature, not a whole lot. Most of our stuff is on our website. That's going to be the best way. But we have up here a catalog from the seed company we work with through Acorn Community. This is our hammocks. You can see some of our members trying to clean up a little bit and take a promotional photo, which I think is pretty fun.
We wore our town clothes together.
Yeah, we did. They don't have holes. And this is a kind of outdated brochure, but it does have our information on the back, or link to our website. This is the Federation of Egalitarian Communities card. They're communities that jointly agree to a few basic tenets, one of which is income sharing, correct? Mm-hmm. And it's kind of shifting and changing what communities are part of that. We've had a lot of turnover in that area and a lot of communities that have been there for decades in this group. Mm-hmm. So it's something to research because we're not the only ones doing cool stuff like this. And our own personal little queer gathering card. So if you're interested in that gathering, you can take one of those. I'll leave these up here when we head out.
So now we can open it up to any questions.
Well, thank you. I'll let you field your own questions.
Yeah, sure.
I just would suggest that if you would give your name before you ask your question, that would be nice for all of us to be able to know who you are.
Hi, I'm Sarah, and I'm in Przybylowicz PVI class right now. I have two questions. First, I would love to hear more about like child raising, and especially like in terms of like the policies of discipline, and like who can and how. And then the second, I'm actually writing my paper on vegan feminism for the class right now. Are there any people who take issue at like having like animals there for consumption, like killing them, like affecting that like mother-child relationship within like animals?
So
Yeah.
yes. Yes. Let's start with the second one first.
Sure.
Okay. So there are definitely vegans on the farm. We have a strong vegan presence. And it's interesting that a lot of our vegans are working in the dairy program. They are interested in the animal welfare, and they want to provide that one-on-one with those animals. So, yeah, they're pretty amazing, I think, to have that value. We have a big community debate about separating the mothers and the babies. That's ongoing, and there's been different things done about it at different times. Some of which went through process, and some of which involved people releasing the babies into the mama pen, and so that didn't go over swimmingly with people. But yeah, it all depends. What else do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I was just thinking the current dairy manager is vegan and also has like done the most in terms of processing the animals afterwards, like tanning the hides and like trying to utilize every part of the animal and respecting it in that way. And then we just have people who like, oh, I just wish there wasn't a dairy program at all. So it's very mixed.
Yeah. They're very well-loved cows. What was your first question again?
Child raising and
Childcare.
policy of
Yeah.
discipline.
Oh, yeah. So really, in our childcare program right now, the parents are the bottom line for that child. They're really not the community's child. They're that parent's child who's kind of a member within the community. is how I feel that things are going. It's not how it always was. We used to have a meta program, which meant the children went to live all in a group together with caretakers who would come and go, and they weren't supposed to be particular to that parent, but that didn't go over great, and we winded up having parents come and say, we can't do this with our kids anymore, we want them back to be like more our kids. So that's what's been going on for many, many, many years. In terms of disciplining, the parents are mostly in charge of doing discipline type stuff. In terms of other community members stepping in, it's something that definitely does happen. We have people who will tell a child, hey, you can't scream in this room right now, like you have to move along. Also, when we're on a primary, I take care of a little kid, Sylvia. She's great, I love her. When I'm on that primary with Sylvia, if Sylvia is misbehaving or throwing a fit or being mean to another kid, it's my job to step in and say, hey, Sylvia, you can't do this, we have to leave this area, or that's unsafe, come down right now, or I'm going to come get you, that sort of thing. So, yeah, anything to add to?
Yeah, I think
there's not a lot.
I feel like there's a lot less discipline that happens at Twin Oaks than in the mainstream, which has its pros and its cons. Like, I'm always, like, really disheartened when I'm in a grocery store or something and a parent is screaming at their child for just doing normal kid things. Mm. And at Twin Oaks, they get to do normal kid things and be, like, a little loud here and there or jump on something that's not going to hurt them. And it's really great for the kid to have those experiences and not be so overprotected or people, like, worrying about what other parents are thinking and things like that. But then sometimes it goes a little too far where it's like, isn't somebody going to do something about the kid on the roof? Or, you know,
yeah.
Which are very safe roofs, but still.
I think as a community, people generally try to say yes to children as much as possible, which is interesting coming into, like, there was a family member with a kid who all morning, she was a toddler, no, you can't touch that, no, and it's like, okay. But it was a very different contrast to where we try to let kids do what they want for the most part, as long as they're not hurting anybody or endangering themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Siri. I use she, her pronouns. So at Twin Oaks, first of all, I love your tofu. It's always a big plus when I go. But with like so many different people and so many different kinds of, I'm assuming, political like agendas of them, how do you resolve problems or debates around the structure of Twin Oaks if people have different ideas about authority and how structure ought to be?
Yeah, at first when you were talking about different political beliefs, I was thinking like, you know, mainstream Democrat, Republican stuff, and I was like, we definitely lean one way on that, with a few outliers perhaps, but they don't really talk about it, which is good. But yeah, in terms of like the inner, yeah, there's definitely been different ways that people have suggested we change the structure. Like, the planners is a really good one. Like, we have the 3 planners, ideally, who have the rotating terms and stuff, but it is a really hard job to fill, so sometimes there's proposals like, oh, 1 person from every SLG should be a representative. And then
SLG is our small living groups.
Right. So, and then that would ensure like that there's representation from like all different aspects of the community, since each different living group has their different feel and like their different social situation and stuff. But then you're talking about trying to get 9 people to come to a meeting every week, which doesn't seem like a big deal, but at Twin Oaks it's kind of hard to get that many people to schedule themselves together. So, yeah, there's definitely different thoughts. And then for most policy changes, a proposal goes up for 10 days, it gets comments, you might revise it, you might decide it doesn't have enough support. For like bigger policy changes, you might need a certain number of votes from the community, like a 2/3 to pass, or just like planner approval to do stuff. So it depends on how big the change is. But I think there's a sense that like overall the structure of Twin Oaks is generally working. and there's like tweaks we might want to make, but that like if they don't happen, it's not that big of a deal. Yeah, I'm not really sure.
Big changes happen slowly at Twin Oaks. That's kind of a hallmark of our community. We have a lot more like stability than a lot of communities have in terms of our infrastructure and our bureaucracy, but we lose a lot of flexibility with that. And people who get frustrated with that aspect of our community frequently do better at Acorn, which is the one that we were talking about that runs on a weekly meeting. If somebody brings something up at a meeting and everybody wants to change it, then that's that.
Behind and then in front.
Hey, I'm John. I'm also in Professor Walsh's class.
Cool.
Thank you so much for this talk. This is really cool to know it was out there and glad that I do now. One thing I wanted to ask you about, just because I don't remember one of you touched on it, was the issue of like healthcare. We talked about basic needs being provided for it. I was just curious, logistically, do you have medical professionals in the community? Do people just go to other hospitals nearby? Like, how is all that handled? Given that kind of debates over healthcare provision are a big thing nationally.
Right.
I'm just curious about your example.
So things have just shifted in that area for us with the advent of Medicaid, which is awesome. We used to try to get everyone who was under a certain income threshold on UVA indigent care, and that provided for most of our needs. We also have our own sort of self-insurance among the FEC communities called the Peach Fund, which stands for something. But what it means is it's basically our self-insurance. So we all throw into that pot, and if something big comes up that can't be covered by our insurance, then that we have, then we'll dip into that. The Medicaid has been great. We're all getting switched over to that. Those of us who are below the income threshold for it. So we're all kind of doctor shopping right now and figuring it out. Twin Oaks, before Medicaid, we provided for glasses and dental and anything like that. After the 6-month provisional period, people could every year get glasses or get their teeth cleaned twice a year, all that stuff.
Yeah, health is definitely one of our largest budgets.
Yeah, we spend a lot. We like to do things ourselves. So a lot of our elder care and a lot of our hospice care, we try to take care of ourselves as much as possible. So people are being cared for by folks who love them and that they know, and we provide hours and resources for that.
We've sometimes had people with medical knowledge as members, and they've seen people and contributed in that way. But it seems like a lot of people are at Twin Oaks and then they leave and then become nurses. I don't know why.
That's like a very popular profession for ex-Oakers.
But there's also like people who do massage or Reiki and some like alternative practices and stuff like that. And so we provide labor credits for those people to do things on the farm. We also sometimes get professional practitioners to come to us to do like STI testing.
That's great.
Or flu shots. Or
It's right in
like
your
that.
living room, basically.
Awesome.
We also have our health closet, which is so convenient because it's like basically a CVS in your house. You can just go and get vitamins or ibuprofen or bandages or whatever. And there's people whose job it is to keep it stocked, so it's super convenient. You don't have to keep your individual first aid kit.
Oh, I'm Gina. I'm also in Professor Walsh's class. I have 2 questions. First one is, how do the children in the community receive education? Like, are they mostly homeschooled? Or, and then the second question is, I know some members have been expelled for physical violence, but how do you deal with people violating other policies? Do you just like talk it out with them, and how does that process go?
You want to do one and I'll do 2?
Sure. So the first question was about, could you repeat the children and...
Yeah, how do they receive
schooling.
education?
Yeah. So basically, that's worked out among the parents and the child, what they want to do. Back in the Pier 1 days, but we used to have a hammocks account with Pier 1, and the community was far wealthier than it was, and a lot of people sent their child to a private Montessori school. And that is not a thing that is probably ever going to happen again at Twin Oaks, to have that like bubble of income. So we definitely have the option to send the kids to public school. Some of the kids try that. We just had Anya, who's 11? 11, go and do a year at public school and try that out. And she ended up not super loving it, so she's going to be homeschooled again. We have the morning program, which is called Unicorns. It's our like babies and toddlers daycare, basically. And they're aiming towards a more structured program there now. So there's like a circle where they all sing and they do their daily, what day of the week is it, and that sort of thing. We also have Forest School, which is when that particular group does their schooling outdoors for the whole, however, 3 hours. So they hike up, they take a very short hike up to a pretty site, and the kids can dig and play with rocks and see what's going on with the creek and like nature-based activities up there. They make fires in the winter, and they go out and make tea over the fire. In the afternoons, there's PDU, which stands for something that the kids made up.
Piru's Diligent University.
Yeah, Piru's Diligent University. The kids made that name. And that's something that they have a teacher come in and teach the older kids about a particular subject. And that's another group thing. And there's lots of one-on-one tutoring. Any member in the community can do education if that's something that they're leaning towards. So we have a lot of kids studying film studies with this guy who's really into film studies, and Latin and programming, and what other subjects are big right now?
I think those three. There's also like piano classes
Oh
and
yeah,
that kind of
music.
thing.
And also just reading and math and all that good stuff. A lot of it happens through the parents working with the child, but a lot of it also happens with just members of the community saying, hey, this is my expertise, I'd love to do a science class for Sammy, and then they do a science class. I've taught art classes for small groups that way, stuff like that.
Yeah, and then in terms of like what happens when members violate other policies, generally what happens when a member either the most common things are what we call the money hole and the labor hole. So the money hole is spending more money than your accounts provide for. So spending money that's the community's and not yours. You can like do a little bit of like, oh, I know I'm going to get allowance next month. I'll spend a little now. It'll even out. You can do that like once in a while, but if you overspend continuously, we're like, wait a minute, you're not following our agreements about how much we're spending every month. Same thing with labor. You can do a whole lot of work and build up a labor balance, and then take a vacation later, or like, no, you're gonna take a vacation right now and like expect to work a little later. But if you're constantly working under what you've promised the community you're gonna work, then that would be the labor hole. So sometimes people get in trouble for those things. You can also, get in trouble for behavioral aspects that don't necessarily fall under an expellable offense. And in these situations, we would have what's called a feedback, which is a community meeting where the focus person listens to how their behavior has affected everyone else. None of our meetings are required, so maybe any given meeting might have between 10 and 30 people, depending on how large the grievance was, or how many people happen to be on the farm, or how well connected that person is socially, or there's lots of different factors. But so they would have a meeting where everyone says, oh, it's so annoying that you did this, and this is how it affected me, and then the focus person has the option to respond or just repeat what they heard to let them know that they heard that. And then depending on how well the feedback went, it might be like, okay, well, now, act right. Or it might be, oh, we still have a lot of concerns. We would feel better if you had a behavior contract. And so in that case, a behavior contract might be drawn up, and it's something like, I will not engage in these particular behaviors, or I will avoid these people that I'm having conflict with, or something like that for a set amount of time, and then we check back in on that once that set amount of time is over. And generally, people will correct whatever the behavior is. Sometimes they're like, I don't want to, and I'm gonna leave voluntarily. Like, I'm realizing the community's not working out for me. It could be the fact that like they keep having a feedback, and then eventually they might have an expulsion hearing. But expulsion is definitely like, it's set up so that there's like a lot of time and a lot of steps that happen before we actually kick someone out. Basically, like once you're accepted as a full member, you're like full member for life unless you really fuck up. So we try to make it like so that we're not like just upset with someone and try to get them kicked out. They have to actually do something that violates our shared agreements. So our expellable offenses are only like 7 different things that you could possibly get kicked out for. Just being annoying or something like that isn't an expellable offense. You have to have like not done your share of labor, or overspent your money, or done something illegal that might put the community at risk, or act violently, have some sort of egregious lie that comes out later about your membership interview, purposely try to disband the community.
Mutiny.
Or like one other thing, I can't remember now. But they have to be pretty big things in order to be expellable. Otherwise, it's just rare. Yeah. Otherwise, we just talk a lot about it, and we're like, this is how your behavior is affecting me. This is how I want you to change. Oh, I will, or I'll avoid you, or whatever. And yeah, working it out. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Ellis. Thank you so much for this talk. It's really interesting. I was curious if it's common for people to, once they're full members, stay for life, or if there's turnover, if people do it for a few years and then leave. You talked about people becoming nurses. So if people stay on average for the rest of their life, essentially.
There's a lot of variation in how this goes down. It's definitely a place where you can stay for life, and many of us do. I very well might. And there's also a lot of people who come and go, either come and stay for a short time and then leave, or come and stay for a while and then go somewhere else and then come be a member again, and that sort of thing. I think part of that is because of the nature of our application process, we attract people who like to travel around and explore things, that have 3 weeks to go a place and do something like this.
Yeah, I think at some point, like the median membership was like 7 years.
Yeah.
But that takes into account people who like left within 3 months, and then people who've been here 27 years. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
You guys mentioned that you use restorative justice. What practices do you associate with that, like in the community?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't gotten super much into it. It's the thing that gets brought up a lot. We're like, oh, we should be doing more restorative justice stuff, but we haven't actually enacted a lot of it yet. So it's still kind of theoretical. I do know like some other communities, I think like Earth Haven community in like the Asheville area, offer courses on it, and so like it might benefit us to do a lot more within community exchanges of different, particularly conflict management solutions. So that's definitely an aspect that we need to grow in.
I'm JJ. Just to piggyback off of your question, are there any processes associated with leaving the community? Like, can you walk us through like the process, or is it just as easy as just walking away?
Sure. I actually give the Oreo on this, and you used to give the Oreo on membership
Orientation
process.
Is
Orientation.
Oreo.
Yeah, thanks. So there are lots of ways you can decide to leave the community. You can just pick up and walk out, and that's a thing that people do occasionally. In that case, I think it's like if you're gone for like 30 days and nobody knows what's up, then your membership is dropped. You can also, like the official route is to go ahead and tell the community, hey, I'm leaving on such and so a date, and then they can wrap things up with you. There are ways to temporarily leave the community, including leave of absence in a case of like a family emergency or something like that. You can get hours and sometimes money to go and take care of your relative or something like that if an emergency arises. There's also suspended membership, which is kind of the same thing but for a longer period of time. Like we have somebody who went to take care of their ailing mother, and they can stay away for 2 years doing that and then come back without process. We also have something which I think is super great called personal affairs leave, which means you can leave the community and go away for up to a year and then come back without process. So for those of us who get restless and want to go explore something else, it's a really great way to like go and do something and then have the stability of a home community to come back to. It's also a good kind of trial period if you're not sure you want to leave Twin Oaks, but you want to maybe go live at Eastwind for a while, which is a similar community out in Missouri. You can say, hey, I'm going to take a pal, and then your spot will be held at Twin Oaks, but you can also decide to either leave or come back at that point. And I think that might be it. Did I miss one? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Hey all, thanks again so much for coming. I'm Patrick. I've got a lot of questions, but I guess you gotta choose, like one or two.
Yeah.
No one can be here all day, but you mentioned a little bit about the criteria that y'all use to accept the new applicants with respect to the gender caps and everything like that. But I'm just wondering, what other kind of criteria do y'all look at when you're like choosing who will be accepted as a new member? How like selective is it? And then the other thing I was wondering is, do you ever notice that people have like a hard time adjusting to the new norms and to the culture there? And how do you sort of like deal with that and help them along, or stuff like that?
Forget the first part now.
Oh, could you repeat the first part, please?
This is the first part. What criteria?
Oh, membership
okay,
criteria. Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely depends. Some people want to be really selective, and some people think it should be open to anybody who wants to.
It's the life raft versus spaceship analogy. Because some people view us as a life raft, and everywhere else is sinking, and we want as many people come, otherwise, like, it will be bad. And some people want to be very, very selective and have like the best of the best for what we want to do and go to the stars. So, most of us fall somewhere in between. And as long as somebody is a reasonably good fit, we'll say, yeah, okay, come on, we can try this out. We do a membership process, which is our 3-week visit. So everybody gets to know you a little bit. You have to be able to work quota and not have problems with that. And otherwise, a lot of us look for good values matches, people who are not going to rub us the wrong way politically and stuff like that, and who can
being helpful, being kind,
friendly,
picking up things easily is helpful. We don't like things like we don't super like is like people who come in and are there for a day and are telling us how we did everything wrong.
Yeah.
Or like people who like are too mansplaining or power over kind of energies.
Being creepy with women or queer people is like, nope, you're right out.
But like, as long as you're like kind of a generally cool human who's like there to learn and experience, we're like, okay, awesome, we'll give you a shot,
So everybody puts in input in our input box, and then the membership team goes through and takes into account all that we know about you and all that the community is inputting about the applicant. And I think people generally lean towards accepting and trying things out with someone new. Does that answer your first question?
Yeah, certainly.
What about your second?
Just what do you do
adjustment.
Right.
Yeah. I'm actually working on that quite a bit because I'm one of the new member liaisons who helps new members adjust to life and community. We have a lot of ways that we try to ease that transition, and it's still hard for a lot of people because depending on where you're coming from and what you've experienced before, it's pretty different. Or not so much if you've lived in another intentional community or like a dorm where everybody's on top of the like crowded or something. So we do orientations for the visitors about all sorts of different topics. Some of it's review from what they learned in their visitor period. Some of it's new stuff. We also host a dinner every week where the new members can come and talk to us about any problems that they have or what they're experiencing. We do check-ins, which is more of a one-on-one conversation at 2 and 4 months. We provide a handbook that has a lot of information. It's a big handbook, but you can find most of what you need in there. And we have a new program that we're just starting called New Member Rocks, and that's like a buddy for a new member, and they can get some sort of labor credit for helping a new member adjust to Twin Oaks and kind of being their one go-to person. So I'm excited to get that launched a little bit more. Yeah.
Some of the difficulties, like, we can't super, influence is a lot of like homesickness kind of things.
Yeah.
If you're far away from your family, you, like, when you first move, you have to work a fair amount to build up that vacation balance first in order to travel. And then $100 a month isn't super much in order to buy plane tickets and stuff. So you would have to be comfortable being if your family lives, on the other side of the country or in another country or something like that, be okay with maybe not seeing them for a year while you build up, and then you can start building that relationship back up. But if your family's close, then maybe that's not a big deal for you. But those are some of the other considerations there.
People definitely have issues with, sometimes we live in a very warm, wet climate. I mean, y'all all do out here too, but we don't have air conditioning in most of our buildings, so some people have trouble adjusting to the climate out there.
And this isn't part of your question, but just a little bit more about money. It is possible to make more money on your own as an individual while you live at the community. It goes into vacation earnings. So it has to be work that you do off of the farm and keep in your separate account, your vacation earnings account, and then you're only allowed to use that account for other vacation things. So you can't use that money to buy a laptop or buy food or things like you would use on the farm. It's specifically for off the farm things, but some people can use that for saving up money to go visit people and stuff like that. But there's some self limitations of that, because you have to do that on top of your work agreements with Twin Oaks, so you have to make quota first before you're allowed to, and things like that. But there is a little bit of room there for extra personal money if you have specific needs.
So I would like to ask a little bit more about the economic. You've talked a lot about the political values and the processes, and the students have asked you a lot of great questions about that. And I'm just wondering if you would talk a little bit more about the values that are underpinning the income sharing. And of course, we live in a world that's dominated by consumption. And so I know you've mentioned the laptop,
Sure.
but there are many ways in which it's just really hard to imagine a world in which we're not constantly spending money and shopping and buying stuff. And so not just the adjustment issues, but also how does one kind of, what does that look like and how does that feel, right? As opposed to just
Sure.
adjustment,
Right.
A lot of our little cultural quirks kind of lend themselves to consuming less and purchasing less. There's nothing to buy on our farm, pretty much.
I have to remember my wallet when I go off the
Yeah,
farm,
a
'cause
lot
I
of
never
us-
carry it.
There'll be a van of us, and we'll be like, "Who has money? We need gas," and everyone will be like, "What? Here's $3 or whatever," because we don't think about it that much. I love not thinking about money that much. We have a culture of mending and a culture of fixing. Stephan does equipment maintenance, so we always try to fix something before we buy a new one. We have a culture around our clothing that it's okay to have clothes that have stains. It's okay to have clothes that have holes.
Patches
We
are
have
awesome.
patchwork. Our patchwork art is beautiful, and many people spend a long time making cool patches on their clothes. I do a lot of that on Stephan's pants. Let's see, what else? We do a lot less in terms of packaging because we can buy things in bulk, and we get a lot of our food from our own farm, so we're not bringing in packaging on our lettuce. It strikes me as so funny to go to the grocery store and see like an individually wrapped potato. I'm like, what did you do to this potato? Or like a
and then
little
it says
package of
gluten-free,
celery.
and it's like, well, no, duh, it's a potato.
Yeah, so some of it.
We also do a lot of dumpstering for food and other things, and also a lot of, we call it pre-dumpstering. So like food bank might have a bunch of extra stuff that they haven't given out yet, but it's about to go bad. So we'll just pick up whatever extras because we're not really picky, and we have a lot of we can like spread it between like the us plus Acorn plus Living Energy Farm, which is another community near us, plus Cambio, which is another community like right down the road. So we can definitely get a lot of stuff that way. I mean, we also still though we buy things from Amazon still. Like we debate whether or not to sell our hammocks on Amazon. So far, we've decided not to because they like price gouge us so hard. But being a community where like when you're on the farm, you feel like self-sufficient and you don't need anything, but Twin Oaks is still part of the rest of the world, and we're engaging in capitalism when we make our tofu, when we make our hammocks. So that's sometimes like a cognitive dissonance that we're trying to deal with, and hoping to go in a more direction where like we grow all of our own food. Like we grow a lot of it, but we don't grow all of it. Like a lot of people would like to move in that direction. But a lot of people would really like us to one day have air conditioning, which we don't. Like, so it's like holding those values of new people coming in and established things, like balancing all of that is really tricky.
Yeah. There's definitely some like, cognitive dissonance about being so impoverished on paper and so wealthy in reality. 'Cause our numbers look pretty dismal when you look at how much each person gets a year.
Like 7,000.
I think 7,000 something per year per member is what we're bringing in. But we also have like so much, and anything we want is basically provided for.
My stepdad was all like, "Oh, you're not doing this American dream. What do you have?" And I'm like, "I have 17 cars. I have 7 houses." How many did you have?
I have a pond and several barns.
Yeah.
A hot tub. Yeah. Yeah. There's also a culture of exchange with one another. So if I need something, the first thing I think is not, I need to go to Walmart or hop online and buy this. My thought is, I'm going to put a card on the 3x5 board and see if anyone else has it. Because so frequently, what you want is something somebody else doesn't need anymore or has extra of. So almost anything that I'm about to shop for, I'll put a card up first and see if anyone just has it laying around.
Yeah, we have a section in our main dining area that's the grabs table. So if there's just anything, you're cleaning out your room and you're like, oh, this stack of CDs, I don't need it anymore, you'll just put it out on the table and people will take what they want, and if it's been there for too long, it'll go into another place, and then it'll go to another place, and then eventually it might go to Goodwill if like it's been several other places first. And then, what was the other thing? Oh, community clothes.
Oh, yeah.
It's getting redone right now, so it's not happening, but we have an area we call Commie Clothes. And it's basically like walking into a thrift store. Like everything's like on racks and different, pants over here, shirts over here. It's not really divided by gender, which is great. But you can just basically go up there and shop for free and get new clothes. Or if you're done with your clothes, you just put them back into the community bin. And if there's like a shirt you really want to keep, then you keep it. And you can do your own laundry if you want, but you don't have to. You could like live totally out of the communal laundry if you're like right nearby. Like never have to wash your own shirt, or you could. But it's up to you. But yeah, you definitely don't have to spend a whole lot of money on clothes because you can just kind of shop on farm that way.
Okay, well, please join me in thanking our